Welcome to the Kourting Happiness Podcast. This is a space where self-care becomes part of your day. A space where you learn evidence-based strategies to help your life, share it with those you love, and cultivate well-being at work. I'm your host, Dr. Kortni Alston. I'm a former news director, television reporter turned happiness scholar, TEDx speaker, and transformational trainer. I also understand hardships. While working my dream job in television, I lived a nightmare suddenly becoming a young widow after 86 days of marriage. I became committed to learning more about resilience, healing, and happiness. This is how I discovered my area of research, which is positive psychology. Now I'm living my calling of training individuals and organizations on happiness. And my new chapter begins with being happily engaged. The Kourting and Kourting Happiness is about a true courtship. I like to say commitment with happiness. The K in Kourting stands for the vulnerability of sharing my story, inspirational interviews with phenomenal people, the infusion of positive psychology, and so much more. You'll learn how to commit to your well-being one episode at a time. I hope you subscribe and share. So, are you ready? Let's get started. Welcome to episode 52. I'm Dr. Kortni Alston. Thank you so much for listening. I'm so happy that you're here. This episode, is going to focus on celebration because we have a lot to celebrate here on the Kourting Happiness Podcast. We're celebrating our year on air. Yes, a year. 1 year podcasting, 1 year sharing positive psychology with the world, 1 year of sharing experts, transformative stories, and more. And we're going to celebrate the Kourting Happiness Podcast actually for the month of October. So this is just the beginning of our celebration. And I'm happy to share all of this with you because it's all about you. You are the greatest inspiration as it relates to this podcast. So you are receiving a personal invitation to all of this. I will certainly keep you posted, and it's all coming soon. So when I thought about celebration and when I thought about this episode, I thought about Dr. Martin Seligman, one of the founders of positive psychology, and his PERMA model. And there's 5 elements in the PERMA model. The P stands for positive emotions, the E for engagement, the R for relationships, the M is for meaning, and the A for accomplishments. Today, we're going to dive in really to the last element, which is all about accomplishments. So not only will we be recognizing the accomplishments here on this podcast, but it's all about inspiring you as it relates to your journey, your accomplishments, or maybe that goal that you've been thinking about for so long, and you're ready to say, yes, let's get started. So accomplishment is one of the most dynamic of well-being because it is something that as individuals we pursue for one's own sake, right? So accomplishment in terms of the PERMA model is broad because it covers achievement, success of one's goals, to even mastery of your task or skill or competence, right? So in this episode, we're going to dedicate it to Bridget Greenville Cleave, because since day one, I have shared so much of her work, and it's only fitting to do so on this milestone episode. So in her book, Positive Psychology, which I highly recommend. So many episodes I've talked about this book. I highly recommend this book for anyone looking to really get started learning about positive psychology. And even for someone like me who's a happiness scholar, I love it. It's like my go-to resource in my library. You can purchase her book in our happiness library on drkortnialston.com. That's drkortnialston.com. So she has an exercise called accomplishment savoring. And we're going to go through that today. So feel free, grab your well-being journal, grab a piece of paper. If you're like me, you might even grab your iPad and pull out your Apple Pencil, right? And What this exercise does, it allows you to really begin to think about your accomplishments. So she recommends creating a list of your accomplishments. Once you've done that, pick one. She also mentions you can add a different accomplishment that maybe you haven't thought about for a while as well. So for 15 minutes, spend it in reflection. Reflect on both of them. Savor the memories and the achievements. So savor the memory of these achievements. So the different memories that you're coming to terms with or are beginning to feel as it relates to those achievements, savor them. For each of your achievements, think about what happened. So I'm going to give you a couple of questions that she shares for you to kind of walk through this process. So think about what happened, right? Think about that achievement and what happened. Kind of almost bring yourself there. Think about when it happened. What were the skills and abilities you used? What were they like? What did you leverage? What did you utilize in terms of your skills and abilities? What were your setbacks that you had to overcome? And who else was there or involved? So think about that, right? What happened? Think about when it happened. What were the skills and the abilities you used? What were the setbacks did you have to overcome in this process? And then begin to think about who else was there, who else was involved. Now begin to think about what makes you proud of your accomplishment. What positive emotions are coming up right now as you look back on it? So think about that. Think about what makes you proud of this accomplishment. She also recommends doing this exercise with a partner, a friend, or even a colleague, and taking turns sharing and savoring. I can see this as a great exercise on a retreat for a company. And you have individuals partnered together in terms of colleagues, and you talk about some of the accomplishments that maybe you didn't really have an opportunity to share with the company, or you kind of felt that you wanted to talk about it more and it wasn't talked about enough. I think it's a great opportunity of feeling seen when I look back on everything as it relates to this exercise, right? So this can serve on so many different levels, on a personal level and then on a professional level. But I love the idea of having a partner or a friend. I could see this with girlfriends or friends, right? And friends coming together and recognizing achievements or certain accomplishments that have happened maybe in the workplace. One of the things that I love is when a friend comes to me and they tell me about their achievement, and maybe the next narrative may be, hey, I'm so proud of my achievement, and then I'm proud of their achievement too. But it's interesting within the narrative hearing this, I didn't feel seen at work. I didn't feel like it was acknowledged at work. I didn't feel as if, although, other people within the dynamic received accolades, but I didn't receive those accolades. So when I hear that, I often tell friends, hey, can I celebrate you? Can I celebrate you? Can I hear about that achievement? Do you mind if I publicly share that achievement? I usually like to get permission. And sometimes it doesn't have to be the narrative of not being seen at work. It can also be because I just love being a cheerleader for anyone that's in my life, for all of my incredible friends. And I love being able to, share their achievements, because I love being able to celebrate them. It's all about celebration. So if you do this, I think it's wonderful to be able to do it individually. But if you also do this, I also think it's great to kind of do it in a couple of different forms. Doing this activity with yourself, doing this activity with a great friend, right? Or friends. Maybe this could be a great virtual Zoom party amongst friends, right? And then also, if you have a buddy at work, I think it's a great exercise to do with a colleague at work. And you can share each other's achievements within the workplace. And you might want to mention it to your manager, right? If you, you might want to mention to your manager, like, hey, I found this great activity. It's called Achievements Savoring. I would love to be able to see us do this within our company structure. And you may be a manager listening, right? Or an executive listening right now. This is something that you might want to include in your agenda for your next meeting, right? So members of your team can feel seen in terms of accomplishments that may not have been recognized across the company, right? And may not because of the sheer number of people within the company structure. But in this case, it allows more for an intimate dynamic to go about sharing one's achievements. I love this exercise. I love it. So if you do it with a partner, she recommends asking questions to help them savor even more, which I really treasure. So this will allow for the individual, right, to even think about the achievement or accomplishment and, greater, because now as a partner, you're asking them questions to help them even more as it relates to savoring the moment. I love this exercise. I cannot wait to hear from you in regards to how this exercise might have served you, also served a friend, also served a partner, also served possibly a colleague. I cannot wait to hear more. But for me, the accomplishments that I'm going to focus on is this podcast, right? This podcast. Because I remember when it was a thought. I remember when I would think, gosh, I want to start a podcast. I remember even as a veteran broadcaster, I didn't know where to start. I feel so grateful for my first podcast with Dr. Stephanie Dean. We hosted a podcast called Thriving in Toxicity together. And I often tell her that starting that podcast together gave me such courage to go solo in this endeavor. And I had challenges, as I mentioned before. I'm a veteran broadcaster, worked in television. I worked in radio. I was accustomed to having a team, especially working as a news director in public radio. I had several engineers. I had a programming assistant. I had all the resources at the radio station. But as an independent podcaster, I needed to turn those roles that I once had with my team. I needed to now fill those roles in terms of myself. So I started with YouTube. Love YouTube. I cannot get enough of YouTube. I think I probably watch YouTube multiple times a day. And I love, checking out different videos. I always feel like when I'm on YouTube, I feel like literally answers are at my fingertips once I type in whatever I'm searching for. But the YouTube videos really helped me understand how to edit podcasts or how to edit my podcast. So I would look at other podcasters, but I also started with those that I admired. And one of them is Amy Porterfield. She's the host of Online Marketing Made Easy. I love all things Amy Porterfield. So I have picked up quite a few of either her courses. I actually signed up for B School in terms of Marie Forleo's program through Amy Porterfield. And so I am a huge fan of Amy and her work and how her energy with her podcast. And I'm also a huge fan because Amy is so organized. And so one of the classes that I had with Amy was Systems That Scale. And I love that she talked about how she structured, even batching episodes as it relates to her podcast. Another thing about Amy is that she also shared that she uses GarageBand. And so that started with my journey of thinking about, wow, okay, well, I already have like everything Mac in my home, from MacBook Air to iMac. I just mentioned my iPad a moment ago, right? So I have GarageBand already. And so what I decided to do, I started to look into YouTube, different videos that could help me edit my podcast using GarageBand. So, I would look at many of them, but you won't believe this. I found one from a middle school teacher. I believe he's middle school. I don't believe he's high school, but he could be high school. My memory doesn't serve me on this, so please excuse me. I wish I knew his name. I talk about him so often. I would love to be able to share his name. Unfortunately, I don't know his name. It seems that he created the video really for his students, which I am so grateful for. I am so grateful he decided to create this video helping his students understand the basics, right? In terms of how to edit, in terms of editing on GarageBand. He helped me so much. His class helped me so much. And it was just one video with him and how he broke it down and how he shared information and, how he walked through step by step. I was like, wow, I was so grateful that not only did he put this on YouTube, but that I found it. He was one of my greatest teachers in this journey, and I don't even know his name. I wish I knew his name. Also, to achieve my goal, I invested into what I needed to succeed. So I purchased an online course from another podcaster that I greatly admire. And Jenna Kushner is the host of the Gold Digger podcast. She is incredible, like Amy. And they both talk about one another. So it's interesting how, how great individuals and how they're connected. And so she created a course all about podcasting, teaching how to record, to even market the podcast. It helped me so much because also what was so great about it is that I still go back and I maybe refer to it sometimes. Oh, what did Jenna say as it relates to this? Or let me get a refresher. Like, oh, I just love it because I felt like I had a companion. Like I felt like I had someone like literally a coach that was there. And even though it wasn't like I was picking up the phone and I was saying, hey, Jenna, but the course certainly made me feel like that. And also Amy's information made me feel that way, that I felt that I wasn't in it alone and that I had all of these resources to help me. I also joined Facebook groups that could help champion my journey. So finding groups on Facebook was really ideal because what's wonderful is that you might have a question, right? And so I would put it out in some of my Facebook groups and people would just give me such great information. And I just was so grateful for it. It's such great energy when you think about it, right? Perfect strangers cheering you on and sharing their skills or sharing their best practices or sharing elements of their journey to inspire you. I love Facebook groups. I consider them like cheerleaders, like these cheerleaders that are online. And so So that's one of the things, as we talked about the savoring the moments and thinking about, different ways and different skills that I learned. I also learned the value and the importance of and the beauty of Facebook groups. I also, I also really value sharing my goals. And in this case, of course, I did it with my amazing fiance. I talk about Ken very often on my podcast when I am teaching as a professor. My college students know so much about him. When I'm doing speaking engagements, I think I bring up my fiance once, twice, or 300 times, or whatever. Uh, but he's a wonderful person, and I am so grateful that he's in my life, and he's so amazing, and he's so supportive. I love how we support each other, because having a wonderful partner who's always cheering you on, it helps so much. As I said the other day during a speaking engagement, my fiance is good for my health, right? Because healthy relationships, positive relationships are good for us. So Ken happens to be also an award-winning journalist, by the way. So he surprised me with a gift during my first podcast, which was a microphone. I love my microphone. I am using it right now. She is gorgeous. Yes. I love how she lights up. And I love how she not only lights up in terms of letting me know, yes, I'm on, and also letting me know really about her beauty, but because it's a gorgeous microphone. But she also lights up my world. And I think because every time I look at the microphone, every time I use this microphone, I think about Ken and his incredible support, and how so many different pieces were involved in getting me here as it relates to this podcast. These challenges, as you can hear, I had many challenges, right? But I'm so proud of how I solved these concerns, how I didn't allow a setback to hold me back as relates to my success. I often tell students about valuing being a lifelong learner. These are my college students, right? I tell them that learning doesn't stop once you graduate college. But what college does, it teaches you how to learn on, in elevating certain levels of that, right? It begins helping you understand the impact of critical thinking. It exposes you. It exposes you. And being open will expose you even more. And I think also another element that helps is not living in ego in that dynamic. See, because if I lived in ego, I might have said, look, I'm a veteran broadcaster. This is ridiculous. I'm not going to, I had teams before. No, I didn't live in ego. I thought it was great that I was going to be all the above in this journey. I was going to, operate like my incredible programming assistant operated with me. I was going to also learn some of the skills that incredible engineers that I worked with in public broadcasting. I would begin to pick up some of their skills. And so not living in ego allowed me to learn even more. It allowed me to explore even more. And it allowed me to ask for help when I needed it, right? Because sometimes that can be challenging, asking for help. But that's the beauty of not living in ego, not living in ego at all. But instead I said, hey, let's go for it. I'm ready to learn more. And it's interesting because now I discuss podcasting with journalists. I also share it with entrepreneurs and experts looking to start their own podcasts. And I am amazed by that, because I started the podcast as part of my happiness journey, to sharing positive psychology, with the world. And what I find interesting is that along the way of learning all of these different dynamics, as it relates to not only sharing more as it relates to positive psychology, but the podcast in general of sharing the knowledge with my students in a college setting or journalists that I meet and that are, that I train or that are looking to expand their platform, or entrepreneurs that are, that have often thought about, what, I want to start a podcast too. It's incredible to me because that woman a year ago wouldn't or couldn't even imagine helping another person with a podcast because, hello, she was searching for help herself. I was searching for help, and it feels wonderful. It feels wonderful to be able to share what I've learned with others on multiple levels, from yes, my scholarly work in positive psychology, and then yes, as it relates to this podcast, that's the construction of the podcast itself. So if you're listening and starting a podcast is part of your happiness journey, you can learn more about some of the technology that I shared by going to drkortnialston.com/podcasting favorites. And I hope it helps you as much as all of the incredible people that I found along the way has helped me, because I share that. I share more about those individuals and more about other resources that I'm not able to really share due to time constraints on this podcast. But it's really a great resource because all of the people that I've shared in the article are just extremely incredible as it relates to podcasting. So if that's something that's on your to-do list or a goal for this year, you want to end your year with a podcast, or you're already thinking about next year and you're thinking about how to create a podcast, certainly go to drkortnialston.com/podcasting favorites. And you can learn more about how I started my podcast. So I say this, as I mentioned, it's been wonderful this entire journey. And another element that has been really wonderful and life-changing is you, all of you. All of you listening in terms of the podcast and meeting listeners gives me the greatest joy. And finding out about how the podcast has either helped you or helped your family, or our manager and executive that reaches out to me and tells me how Kourting Happiness is helping their team. I love that. I love that. I truly am inspired by all things you. So if you're thinking about a goal, and if you have a goal that has been living inside of you for a long time, and you're wondering where to begin, sort of like I was with my podcast, right? Start thinking with Dr. Stephen Covey in mind. And his approach was thinking with the end in mind. I think if you think with the end in terms of its impact, how it's going to serve, and then work your way to the beginning, this will let you know kind of what you need to get started and perhaps where to start in terms of seeking help, right? In terms of whatever resources that is. But thinking with the end in mind also allows you to really think about that impact, how it's serving. And I think that's a great place to start because it's a great feeling. Like as we're talking about achievements and savoring, the greatest part of that is thinking about how, in this case, this podcast is served. So one of my dear friends, Ardinia Myrick, who has been on the podcast for a special presentation. She is an incredible international speaker, trainer, who started a mindfulness practice at her job that is so popular that people are showing up during breaks, holiday breaks. So it tells you a lot about the value and the impact of her mindfulness approach at work. Well, Ardinia always says this to me that I love that she shares, because we talk about the value of classes and courses and coaching, or different books that we're reading, or finding different resources online. She always encourages investing in to help shorten your learning curve. Think about it. Makes sense, right? Investing helps shortens your learning curve. So the time that I invested searching on YouTube, trying to find a video or videos, because I had several that helped me tremendously. I just love talking about the gentleman who I wish I knew his name, helped me out so much in terms of that. But there were other great videos too that were serving me. So, I consider that more an investment in time. But then I also mentioned the investment in actually making a purchase where I purchased Jenna's course. And that really helped shorten my learning curve too. So think about what you need and how it can help you do just that. And as always, remember on this very happy anniversary of Kourting Happiness that I'm cheering you on every step of the way. Thank you so much for listening. Let's continue this conversation online. Email us at podcast@drkortnialston.com. That's podcast at drkortnialston.com. Join us on Instagram at Kourting Happiness. Don't forget, that's courting with a K. Also, I hope you join our private Facebook community. You can find us at Kourting Happiness Podcast Community. Our private Facebook group is a safe haven to share, meet more people looking to build positive relationships, focus on well-being, and create a happier life. Now, are you ready to spread happiness? We hope you subscribe and share this podcast with your family, friends, coworkers, and all the important people in your world. We release a new episode every Thursday. Congratulations on your continued commitment to your Kourting Happiness journey. Thank you so much for listening. We want you to be well, be happier, and be kinder to yourself. We can't wait to see you next week.